Alright, so it's a good day up here in Wisconsin. We're actually getting ready to drop this engine back into the car. And this is a 2005 BMW 545. Similar engines used in the other series cars. It's got a ZF transmission. And before I drop it back in, I just wanted to go around it one more time. There's only a couple little cables and screws left to put in, but those can be done in the car because some don't actually connect to the harness in the car. But I just want to go through, give everybody a good view of some of these things that are nice and easy to see when I can actually rotate around the engine and show where their connecting points are. So, starting up on the top, we've got a cable up here. This goes to both the driver and the passenger side of the engine. It comes down and connects to your ignition coils. And it just runs along this entire rail. We have a couple of ground wires that come up. Follow it around to the other side. Again, just the ignition coils. We have a couple of ground wires that come up. Driver's side of the car. Got a cable that comes down here underneath our connection there. Now, most of these cables have their own independent connector style on the end. There's a couple of them that are similar, but most of them are cut to a length and kind of bent around and have a different connector style, so it's difficult to hook them up wrong. And this one does not have the metal spring clip in it, or retaining clip. I do have it outside the car. I'll put it back in when I actually drop it back in. So that is that cable right there. That actually connects to another harness that's inside the car. I believe it's on one of the coolant tubes, or the AC unit, or radiator unit. We have this one down here. Clips in there. We have right here. Comes down. It actually goes to these two solenoids that are in there. And we have this one right here. Comes down. And actually, it's just this one blue wire. Comes around. Here's the back side of your alternator. And we have our actual cable coming around again to the alternator. And if I remember correctly, that was a 13mm socket. Let's remove that. Passenger side, come on down. One in here, comes down, goes underneath. To those valves. So just so you can see separation in them. And these are actually kind of nice because they are different style connectors. So if you mix these up here, even when you get down here, the connectors that go on those valves are different than the one that goes onto the compressor. One right there, one down there, and when this is in the car, this one's actually tough to get to, but nice and easy when you have it outside, just because of where everything sits in the car right along this rail. And this one actually did have a little bit of a chip out of the plastic, so I put a little bit of adhesive on there and seal it up and hold it in place. Here, you can see we're reconnected on both of those. These motors just kind of screw in when you're putting them back in. On the back side here, we have a cable coming out here, moving around, and going to the back. You can see how to unlatch that if you need to. It's kind of a blind spot. On the driver's side, cable coming out of the back. passenger side, eccentric shaft sensor, another one coming through here for this cam sensor, and a third one down here for that sensor. So 3 different type of connectors. And sticking on this side, we have our other harness coming down on the back side of the transmission. Let's see, we have a sensor down there. These just clip into a plastic housing underneath on the transmission. Couple metal clips that hold those on there. It goes back to that mechatronics point. Then we have another one which gets plugged into the exhaust manifold. Oxygen sensor. And on the other side, where this harness comes up, you have one that splits off and goes down to the oil pan for a sensor down there. The rest of it comes over, and again we have an exhaust sensor. So, getting ready to put everything back in. Like I said before, a couple last sensors to connect, a couple of screws to put in. But, hopefully these little short videos give you guys a better view of what things look like when you can't really see them inside the car and you're trying to make these connections or disconnections. So hopefully the videos help. Alright, one more video before I actually put the engine in. So just want to get the car itself kind of in the state that it was. Show you guys how much I had to do in order to actually get the engine out and what clearances were needed. In the front here, one of the spots where it was leaking antifreeze was actually out of the radiator itself, so I had to get a new radiator. That ended up having to come out anyhow, just to get the front space for the engine to come out nice and easy. Really wasn't that difficult to get out of there, but it definitely made it a lot easier with that extra space. So you can see, as long as I had everything out, went through and cleaned everything up, everything's nice and dry. So if there are any leaks in the future, at least I know there'll be new leaks. Well, yeah, I'll have to track them down. Okay. Did end up replacing one of the engine mounts. It was actually the driver's side mount. They are different part numbers, driver's side to passenger side, so just a little bit better view of the steering mechanism. Don't forget the ground strap on the engine mount on the passenger side. Over here, that entire wiring harness is still on the engine. We'll be plugging into all those connectors. You can see most of them are unique shapes and sizes, so should go back together fairly simply. Alright, getting to the end of this project with the BMW 545i. Anybody that's seen any of the other videos that I did, you'll know that I had to pull the engine fix a few different things, and really just wanted to kind of give everybody a good visual of how things looked on the engine and where they were located when I had everything outside the car, because a lot of times when you're working inside of it, there's a lot of blind spots. So, a couple little notes. I realize not everybody's going to pull an engine in a car to fix these things. But something that I did find helpful, if you ever wanted to do it, is to pull the engine and to put it back in. The exhaust manifolds did have to come off on both sides, and I found it easier to get the engine hoist and transmission disconnected, get the engine hoist in place, and lift the engine about an inch or two, and then you could actually get a better angle on the exhaust manifold bolts. They were 11mm socket in order to get them off there, and it came off pretty easy and went back on pretty easy. You can actually lower the engine all the way and then put them on, but you have to get underneath the car and you have to use a ratchet with some swivels, and it was just easier to do it when it was still an inch or two up, and then getting the oxygen sensors back on. So pretty much everything's going back in. I had most of the engine assembled before I put it in, except for the few connections that have to go to the surrounding parts of the car. One thing that I wanted to show, pulling the engine really wasn't that bad. Once you locate the electrical center of the car, mine happens to be on the passenger side, and that's the main harness going to the engine. Goes through a couple of rubber grommets, and pretty much every one of those connectors in there is an independent style, so none of them really repeat. So disconnecting everything was easy, putting it back in was nice and easy. The wires were cut to length, the connectors were all different pins, so you couldn't really make a mistake. And then the only other thing to note was that there was a ground wire that you had to connect right back there. So these videos are just about done. Hopefully they're helpful for a few people, just giving you guys a better visual on things. And if anybody gets any help out of it, that's great. Glad I did it.